Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Kirkus Reviews and Ingram Library Services for our third Cut the Line Reader's Advisory webinar. My name is Megan Labrise. I'm the editor-at-large of Kirkus Reviews and host of their weekly podcast, Fully Booked. We are very excited to share this hour with you as we talk about read-alikes for Ann Tyler's newest novel and celebrate our love of literary fiction. Before we begin, I have a few reminders for you. After the completion of this webinar, you'll receive a download link for a certificate of participation to qualify for Reader's Advisory Professional Development. Everyone who's attending live today will be entered to win copies of the books by our author panelists. We'll contact you after the webinar if you've won. If you experience any technical issues during our presentation, please send a note in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to address it. We encourage you to ask questions of our presenters and panelists. You'll be able to do so throughout the webinar and through that Q&A box. We'll also be sending out polls and questions. We'd love your responses, so please do participate. Now let's talk about why we're here today. 3 Days in June is the latest fiction from Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ann Tyler, whose 25 novels include Breathing Lessons, The Accidental Tourist, and Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant. Kirkus calls 3 Days in June sweet, sharp, and satisfying. It's the story of a divorced couple contending with some uncomfortable memories on the eve of their daughter's wedding, and that's just the start of it. 3 Days in June hit shelves on February 11th of this year, and it's been racking up holds. We took a look at some of the largest library systems in the country and found more than 10,000 people across those systems are waiting to read this novel. Now I'll turn things over to Wendy Ranciere to talk you through some of Ingram Library Services and Kirkus's recommendations of alternative titles your patrons will love to read while they wait their turn for 3 Days in June. Wendy Ranciere received her MLS from the State University of New York at Buffalo in 2004. She then escaped the cold north to become a librarian for Roanoke County Public Libraries in lovely Southwest Virginia. After working as a cataloger for a short time, she became the Roanoke County Children's Librarian and worked for 13 years in that role. Ripe for a new adventure, she joined Ingram in 2017 and chooses awesome children's books for libraries across the country. Her hobbies include reading, of course, cross-stitching, and attempting to parent 2 children. Over to you, Wendy.
Thanks, Megan. Good afternoon. I'm so pleased to be with you today to talk about books that your patrons may love while waiting on Ann Tyler's 3 Days in June. I think we have a good list of books for you that will resonate with Ann Tyler's fans, books that focus on gentle storytelling, character-driven narratives, and likable and complicated protagonists. So let's dive in. Anna Quinlan's After Annie explores how family and friends try to make life make sense after the vibrant Annie Brown dies suddenly. Annie is only 37, with a husband and 4 children, when she quickly and without warning passes. Think about George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. He thought his boring life had no impact, but it turns out it affected everyone. Anna Quinlan, who herself lost her mother at 19, delicately explores the grief of Annie's husband needing to now raise 4 children while barely being able to cope, at one point revisiting an old flame. Her children of various young ages deal with grief through acting out, bedwetting, and the 13-year-old daughter, Allie, trying to make a makeshift parent when her dad struggles. Anne Marie, Annie's best friend, who without Annie struggles with staying sober. Will she be able to survive without her best friend as an anchor? This is a study of a family's grief and how we learn to go on. Next up, there were 4 Blue sisters who grew up sharing a bedroom in a New York City apartment. In The Blue Sisters by Coco Mellers. At the age of 27, the 3rd eldest sister, and the one who everyone thought was maybe the best, dies suddenly of a drug overdose. The girls decide to come back home to New York City when their distant mother and alcoholic father decide to sell their childhood apartment. The sisters reunite to grieve, but they are each going through their own personal struggles. The oldest daughter and caretaker with a seemingly perfect life is miserable and has started making questionable choices. The second oldest daughter is a failed boxer and is leading an unmoored existence in LA as a bouncer. The youngest daughter is a supermodel whose partying has gotten out of control. This reunion to a New York City apartment creates tension for the girls, accusations, and judgment, but ultimately there's healing in the story of grief, addiction, and sisterhood. Next, we have the debut, City of Laughter by Tameen Fruchter. Tameen draws on real and imagined Jewish folklore in this intergenerational tale. Set in New York, Shiva is recovering from a heartbreak after she is left by her first real girlfriend and dealing with the death of her father. Shiva feels stuck and begins to delve into Jewish folklore after finding a short film in her father's belongings, so much so that she enrolls in a master's program. She's always wanted to know more about her now dead grandmother, Syl, and her great grandmother, Mira, but her mother, Hannah, will not say much about them. Her master's program takes her to study in Warsaw near the small town of Ropshitz, where her grandmother lived. What she finds in Poland will shape her understanding of her family's past and future. This is a lovely tale of queer love, heartbreak, family connection, and our need to know where we came from. You probably remember Kylie Reid's first novel, Such a Fun Age, which is a great title to suggest as well, but we're going to talk about Come and Get It. This novel is set in 2017 in the University of Arkansas, and author Agatha Paul is teaching writing and researching for her next book. Agatha is white, 38 years old, and recovering from a recent split from her wife, who married her for health insurance. She meets Millie, a 24-year-old Black RA, and asks if she can come interview some of her residents for a possible book idea. After meeting the girls, she becomes more fascinated by them and their lives and their relationship to money. Agatha starts to play Millie to eavesdrop on the girls as they live right next door. She uses this information to write articles about their lives and sell them to Teen Vogue. Seems pretty devious and straightforward, but Kylie Reid is a master at layered characters. There is razor-sharp dialogue, mean girl behavior, pranks gone wrong, and of course, themes of class, consumerism, and racism in academia. This is a slow burn with an explosive climax. This next title caught my eye as I am an avid cross-stitcher, but this one doesn't belong in the 700s. Cross Stitch is a translated novel by Jasmina Barrera, who resides in Mexico City. This coming-of-age novel explores the friendship of three Latina women. Mila's world is shattered when she finds out her childhood friend, Citlali, has drowned. Mila wonders if it was an accident or a suicide. Mila recollects her youthful friendship with Citlali and Dahlia through old journals. They have been friends throughout high school, traveled together, and had a bond strengthened by their shared love of embroidery. While looking through her friendship with Citlali, she wonders if there were signs she missed. The story is interwoven with historical information about weaving and embroidery in history and how it has always helped women to heal wounds. This book is a translation from the Spanish. The friendships are very rich and explores the things in life that weave us together. Our next title is a lighter read, but a touching and insightful family story. Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa starts with 25-year-old Takeko being heartbroken by her fiancé choosing to leave her for another woman who works in their office. Takeko leaves her job as she cannot face it working with them every day, but she doesn't want to leave Japan. Her uncle owns a cramped bookshop and offers to let her stay with him if she opens the bookstore in the mornings. Her uncle Satoru helps Takeko navigate her grief and explore new relationships in the shop. Takeko suggests books, help the book lovers that come into her shop, and it helps her learn more about herself. The book I have to look up. It's a book town in Japan full of secondhand bookshops and seems so charming, which adds to the environment and cozy atmosphere of this sweet tale. We are moving from Japan to France in Forgotten on Sunday by Valerie Perrin, which takes place in a charming French village and weaves together three stories. Justine is just 21 and has found great joy in life working at a nursing home. She loves her work and treasures the stories she learns from the residents. She befriends a nearly 100-year-old woman, Helene, and records her life story, especially the mystery of the love of her life who was lost in World War II. Justine is no stranger to sad stories. She's been raised by her grandparents due to a tragic and mysterious car accident, which took the lives of her parents. In addition to Justine and Helene, a prank caller has been phoning the families of the nursing home residents and telling them their relatives have died and they need to show up to the nursing home to pick up their remains. The prank calls are going exclusively to the residents that don't get visitors, the ones forgotten on Sunday. What mysteries will be revealed from Justine's past, the prank caller, and Helene's lost love? You may remember Charmaine Wilkerson and her hit Black Cake from 2022. Well, be sure to check out her new offering, Good Dirt. Ebby comes from a wealthy and prominent Black New England family. She is left at the altar by her white fiance, and this gives her lots of unwanted notoriety for the second time in her life. When she was 10, she witnessed an armed intruder shoot her 15-year-old brother and also destroy a family heirloom, not a stoneware jar. Abby gets the chance to manage a friend's rental house in France and get away from it all. During this time, she decides to dive into her family's history of the broken jar. Abby finally tries to deal with the robbery that took her brother's life, the history of the jar, which has been passed down in her family for 150 years and made by an enslaved ancestor. But unfortunately, Ebby's ex-fiance and his new girlfriend show up to rent the property in France she's managing. What are the odds? The story of the robbery, the murder, the ex-fiance, and the history of Ebby's family weave into a connected, intriguing narrative that will keep you turning the pages. You probably remember this cover from a couple of years ago. Ann Napolitano is a master of family drama, and Hello Beautiful is a great book to suggest to Ann Tyler readers. Hello Beautiful explores the strong bonds and love between the four Padavano sisters, spanning between 1960 and 2008. William has had a sad and lonely upbringing, all but ignored by his parents until he meets Julia, the oldest Padavano sister, and they are fated to be together. William is embraced by Julia's family, and as readers, we are too. Ann Napolitano switches narrators throughout the book, so you become very invested in each character, especially when catastrophe strikes and the sisters are pulled apart. Will the love they have for each other bring them back together? I have another expansive love story for you in Carissa Chen's debut novel, Homeseeking. I love a novel that pulls you back and forth in time. Suchin and Haiwen mate when they live in Japanese-occupied Taiwan in the 1930s. They fall in love as teens, but Haiwan joins the Chinese Nationalist Army, and Suchi is set to Hong Kong for safety. They end up living different lives, ending up in different places in the world, and eventually meeting again in Los Angeles 60 years later. Major events of 20th century China are the backdrop for this story. You follow both characters as they deal with the aftermath of changing governments, ending up in places they didn't foresee. Even though unrequited for much of their lives, this is a beautiful and enduring tale of love over time. If you're in the mood for some 1990s nostalgia, try I'll Come to You by Rebecca Kaufman. This book takes us through the year of 1995 with the ups and downs of one family. The story centers on Ellen, an aging divorced woman who works as a school bus driver and feels she is probably too late to the game to think about falling in love. Until she meets Gary, a sweet man who understands her life with adult children. Ellen's son Paul and his wife Corinne are waiting the arrival of a baby they had a hard time conceiving, while also dealing with issues of aging parents. Corinne's mother Janet is struggling to find a way to tell Corinne that her dad Bruce is starting to fade into dementia. Over the year, we see this family go through good times and bad, and we will see ourselves in Kaufman's delicate. Okay, I'm going to quote the first line of publisher marketing on this next one. 7 children, 5 mothers, 1 idyllic commune. What could go wrong? This is the hook for Randy Susan Myers, The Many Mothers of Ivy Puddingstone. We begin in 1964 with Annabelle Cooper, who wants to save the world during Freedom Summer in Mississippi. Later, she and her husband and 4 other couples create a commune with politically like-minded people to progress their work. As things progress politically, the couples move their children to a haven in Vermont. The parents each take turns going to Vermont to care for the kids, but not all danger comes from the outside. Annabelle's daughter yearns to leave Vermont and live a normal life, but when a shocking event alters their lives, she will learn the limits of her parents' safeguards. This novel explores parent-child relationships, what we as parents can and cannot do to protect our children from a flawed but somewhat hopeful world. Next up, you may remember the recent Netflix series based on this title, The Perfect Couple by Ellen Hilderbrand. This novel is a fun mix of whodunit and rom-com set in Nantucket. With this, and the Otis Winbury wedding is set to be a fairy tale affair. Benji, the youngest son, is smitten with his bride, and his parents are paying for a lavish affair. His mother is Greer Garrison, a well-known novelist, who may be at the end of her career as she can't manage a new bestseller. When the maid of honor shows up dead, what should be a perfect day turns into a perfect mystery. Chief Ed Capinash must question the bridal party and figure this out. We are invited to discover the mystery along with the chief as we follow the investigation and a timeline that explores the love story of Benji and Celeste, the bride-to-be. Is it really the perfect romance? Next, we have Rental House by Y.P. Wang. It is an examination of marriage and how it is tested when your parents join you on vacation, which sounds kind of scary to me. Hiru and Nate are meant to be, and although from different backgrounds, both share the characteristic of never really gaining the trust of their parents. Keiru is the daughter of strict Chinese immigrant parents, and Nate is from a working-class Appalachian family with their own hangups. The couple has two vacations, one on Cape Cod with Keiru's parents, who prize suffering and abhor anything seemingly lazy, like using the dishwasher. Nate's family vacation is in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that has him dealing with his parents' conservative views of marriage, work, and some xenophobia. The novel switches perspectives between Nate and Keiru, and we even get a fast forward 5 years into the future on another vacation. How does their marriage grow under pressure? It's a short novel at 224 pages, so a quick read, but Weiki's dialogue is sharp and funny and packs an emotional punch. Julia is almost 60, living a somewhat normal life as a part-time librarian in suburban Chicago. While shopping for her husband's 60th birthday party, she runs into an old friend, Helen, an old friend she'd hoped never to see again. Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo is an exploration, into motherhood, past, present, and future. We begin in the middle. Julia's meeting Helen Russo at the grocery store brings up memories of Julia as a hopeless young mom trying to navigate life. Helen had reached out to Julia years ago when she saw how much she was struggling to fit into her upper middle class life. Julia befriends Helen in their charming upscale life. The chapters go back and forth to Julia's upbringing with her own single mom, financial insecurity, and the emotional trauma of having a somewhat indifferent parent. It feels like Julia doesn't know how to fit into her role as a perfect mom when she makes a terrible error in judgment, an affair, and it ends her friendship with Helen. Julia still struggles through the present day as her own grown children are about to leave the nest. The dialogue is funny, and it is impossible to look away from Julia's self-sabotage. This book explores motherhood from many angles and spares no critique of class in this domestic drama. The annual vacation in Cape Cod is even more meaningful for middle-aged mom Rocky, now that her children are grown and time with them is not as abundant. In Sandwich by Catherine Newman, Rocky is dealing with life after 50 and is now in the sandwich generation, which I didn't know till I researched this. Grown children with elderly parents who still treat you as a child while parenting your own grown children. Rocky, her husband, two 20-something children, one with a girlfriend in tow, and Rocky's parents are all sharing this old house with one bathroom for a week. We follow Rocky's memories, frustrations, and hot flashes as Rocky reveals some hidden secrets of her past. The dialogue within the family is funny, and when the novel's tone gets more serious, it's a very moving and thoughtful reflection on family change. Next up, we have Sipsworth by Simon Van Boy, a quiet and beautiful tale on finding meaning in life just when you think there's nothing left. Helen Cartwright returns to the English village where she grew up after living decades abroad. She's now a widower and also lost her son. She is content to just wait for death in a small cottage, keeping to herself. She happens upon one day an uninvited guest in her home, a mouse. She tries to capture it to get it out, but it soon becomes endeared to her. Helen names the mouse Sipsworth, and her relationship with the mouse pushes her to get out in the community. An example, going to the library to find a mouse care book, the hardware store to find a new enclosure to build for Sipsworth. We learn a bit more about Helen's history through her stories to Sipsworth, and we relish watching Helen renew her life. This is a charming story of animal healing and how maybe you can go home again and still find something new. Okay, I love Rainbow Rowell. I bought all the Simon Snow trilogy in hardcover, but I wasn't sure how I would feel about her coming of age adult novel. Well, I loved it. Slow Dance takes place in Omaha, where Shiloh, now 33, has spent her whole life, married, divorced, and living in the house where she grew up. She had teen dreams of leaving Omaha, going to California, and becoming an actress. Her teen best guy friend Carrie was going to leave to join the Navy. Carrie did leave to join the Navy. There was always romance simmering between them as teens, but nothing much came of it at the time. They drifted apart, as most young friendships do, but when a mutual friend moves back to Omaha and invites them to a wedding, Shiloh cannot wait to see if Carrie shows up. He does, and they begin a courtship, which of course is fraught with difficulties, as with any two adults with complicated lives who try to get together. You have glimpses of Shiloh and Carrie's relationship before when they were teens, and it is satisfying to see it come together, although much later than they had hoped. I think, as always, Rainbow does a deft hand when developing characters, and you shouldn't miss this. This list of lovely literary fiction would be incomplete without Anne Patchett. Tom Lake takes place during the early days of the pandemic. Laura and Joe Nelson have a cherry orchard, and due to COVID restrictions, they don't have seasonal workers to bring in the harvest. Laura's 3 adult daughters decide to shelter in place with her parents and help to harvest the cherries. To kill time, the girls decide to pepper their mother with questions about her old acting days, and especially her brief romance with recently deceased world-famous actor Peter Duke. We get a novel told in 2 timelines as Laura shares some stories about coming of age and getting an opportunity to participate in a summer stock production of Our Town in Tom Lake, Michigan. She meets crazy and driven Peter, who goes on to great things, and Laura goes on to be a farmer, a wife, a mom. We go back and forth between 1984, the summer then set Laura's life in a different direction than she had managed, and 2020, as Laura looks at what the might have been aspects of her life. Her daughters learn things about their mother they never knew, though not everything. Much like cherries, life is sometimes sweet and sour, and Anne Patchett gives a nice balance of both in this novel. The Townsend Family Recipe for Disaster by Shauna Robinson is a great summer read packed with heart. May Townsend is a biracial woman who has grown up estranged from the Black side of her family who lives in the South due to an old rift from her late father. May heard tales of her family in the South and the traditions, most notably the 4th of July picnic, the biggest event of the year for the Townsend family, an event she has never experienced. May is planning her own wedding to a white fiance and imagines her wedding with the lack of any of her Black roots. News comes to her that her grandmother has died, so May decides it's time to explore her family down south. She shows up to find the Townsend family in chaos, a lost mac and cheese recipe, her father's long-standing rift still in place, and plenty of other family turmoil that is threatening the annual barbecue. May steps in to save the day, or at least the barbecue anyway, and learns about herself along the way. You enjoy seeing May grow in herself through meeting her family, and the author does a great job of describing the microaggressions and racism that May struggles with at home and how her family, her newfound family, helps bolster her self-esteem. This is a warm story to sink into, and the food and family vibes are perfect for a summer day. Next up, we have Sarah Yam with Unfinished Acts of Wild Creation. We follow a tight-knit Jewish family over the course of 4 decades as they deal with motherhood, grief, and illness. In 1974, cellist Louise Rakoff meets inspiring therapist Leon Rosenberg at a Rosh Hashanah dinner. They build a loving family built on honesty, humor, and sometimes arguments. Everything is rock solid until Louise is diagnosed with the same degenerative disease that left her mother with a slow, painful passing. Louise decides she can't put her family through that, and she decides to leave. Is it selfish or loving? When she disappears, the rest of her family grapples with Louise leaving. Mortality When she disappears, the rest of her family grapples with Louise leaving, mortality, and the desperate quest across the globe to find answers. But eventually they end up back together. While delving into grief, this story is about the wild beauty that makes life worth living. This novel is based on Sarah Yam's own experience with being an author and mother while living with a disability. We All Live Here by an author who needs no introduction. Let's meet Lila Kennedy, a writer whose life is falling apart. Lila's husband left her for a younger woman. Her mother died, and her stepfather moved in to help out, but doesn't seem like he has any intentions of ever leaving. Like the sandwich novel we talked about earlier, Lila is in the sandwich generation, dealing with parents as an adult, while she also navigates the emotions of her own growing children. Lila's daughters, who are 8 and 16, have their own dramas. Lila deals with a house that needs repair, having romantic feelings for her gardener, and trying to figure out how to get another book manuscript completed. Then her biological father, a has-been actor who she had not seen in years, stops by and moves in too. Hence the title, We All Live Here. Lila learns there are still life lessons we can learn sometimes from unexpected places while we are just trying to make it through the chaos of every day. Next up, Phoebe shows up to an exclusive hotel in Rhode Island, planning on ending it all. She lost her husband to another woman, had failed attempts at IVF, and she just suffered through the death of her cat. She's had it. And thought this beautiful hotel would be the best place to end things. When she shows up at the hotel, it is full of wedding guests, all there for a lavish $1 million wedding. Lila is the bride who just lost her father, but his wish was for her to be married, so he left her money for this elegant affair. Phoebe and Lila become confidants. Isn't it weird how sometimes you can easily share things with strangers? Lila decides to involve Phoebe in her wedding festivities in an effort to change her mind. This encounter at the hotel leaves Phoebe with moments of self-discovery through various pre-wedding events. Pick up The Wedding People by Allison Esbach to find out what happens. Can You Ever Really Go Home Again is the theme of What Falls Away by Karen Anderson. Cassandra Solberg is an artist in Minnesota who has not been home to rural Utah in 40 years. She was brought up in a strict Mormon household, and when she became pregnant as a teen, she was forced to give up her baby and was cast out of her family. Now that Cassandra is nearly 60, she is begged by her brother to come home and care for her ailing mother who is suffering with dementia. Cassandra remembers her past, told in alternating timelines in the story, and she reflects on religious trauma, growing up in a patriarchal society, but also realizing the effect that her female relationships have imprinted on her life. She also meets Matthew, a journalist who is adopted and tracing his origins to the regions of Utah. He looks a bit like the father of Cassandra's surrendered baby. Could he be hers? Our author, Karen Anderson, is a Utah native, and her vivid descriptions of the stark landscape play an important part of Cassandra's identity. Can Cassandra find healing in a place that left so many scars? And that is my last title.
Wendy, that was so good. I could listen to you talk about books all day long.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I feel like you put a lot of heart into it, and I appreciate all of these recommendations. I noted a few for my TBR. So thank you
Great.
very much. Okay, everybody. Now let's hear a little bit about the books and authors you'll be hearing from on today's panel. Regina Porter is an award-winning playwright and author of The Travelers, a finalist for the PEN Hemingway Award for debut novel, and longlisted for the Orwell Prize for political fiction. A graduate of the MFA fiction program at the Iowa Writers Workshop, her writing has been published in the Harvard Review, Tin House, and the Oxford American. She lives in Brooklyn. Her most recent novel, The Rich People Have Gone Away, was published on August 6, 2024, by Hogarth. A diverse group of New Yorkers are brought together by a search for a missing woman, Kirkus writes in a starred review of this restless, intentionally unsettling novel that establishes Porter as a distinctive, confident literary voice. Betsy Lerner is the author of the popular advice book for writers, The Forest for the Trees, and the memoirs Food and Loathing and The Bridge Ladies. Her first novel, Shred Sisters, was published on October 1st of last year by Grove. She received an MFA in poetry from Columbia University. A publishing professional for over 30 years, Lerner is a literary agent in New York. Shred Sisters is a wry and riveting debut novel about family, mental illness, and a hard-won path between two sisters, Kirkus writes in a starred review, calling it a seamlessly constructed and an absorbing fictional world full of insight about how families work. Shannon Bowring's debut novel, The Road to Dalton, was selected as an NPR Best Book in 2023 and won the Maine Literary Book Award for Fiction in 2024. Her work has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net and was recently anthologized in the Best Small Fictions. She lives in Maine and holds an MFA from the University of Southern Maine Stonecoast. A sequel to The Road to Dalton was published by Europa Editions on September 3rd, 2024. It's called Where the Forest Meets the River, and that's the one we'll be discussing today. A small town in northern Maine mourns the sudden death of a woman with postpartum depression, Kirkus writes, calling Where the Forest Meets the River a moving portrait of the ways people survive palpable, harrowing grief. All right. Welcome, Regina Porter.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Where are our friends? Betsy Lerner, Shannon Bowring, come on down.
Oh,
Hello. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, I've heard. Here we go. Hello, Betsy. For the purposes of our conversation today, is it all right if we address one another by first name?
sure.
Sure?
Yeah.
Good, good, good. Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to have you here. So the first one's an easy one. I hope you're ready for it. It's, would you please describe your novel to potential readers? Regina, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm a huge Patricia Highsmith fan, and so when I sat down to write this novel, I wanted to explore a mystery against the backdrop of the pandemic. It's about a group of family and friends and what happens when one of them, a pregnant woman, goes missing against the backdrop of the pandemic. And I guess it's an exploration of, would your better or worse demons come out if someone you love disappeared under mysterious circumstances? Yes.
Thank you. Betsy, how about you?
Hi, thank you. My novel is about how mental illness impacts a family, told mostly through the story of two sisters. Olivia is the older sister. She's charismatic, athletic, beautiful. Quickly, we start to see that her behavior turns erratic and eventually self-destructive. Younger sister Amy narrates the book. It's a first-person narrator, and she lives under the shadow of Olivia. She's the do-gooder in the family, the rule follower. She wants to be a scientist. She believes in the empirical world. As they grow up over 10 or 15 years, Ollie's disappearances and her extremely destructive appearances impact the entire family. And we watch Amy come of age, trying to learn how to deal with her sister and really ultimately herself.
Thank you. Shannon.
So my novel is the second in the Dalton novels trilogy, but I wrote it in a way that you could read it as a standalone if you haven't read The Road to Dalton first. I wanted Dalton to be welcoming, no matter where when and how you're joining in. And it's set in 1995 in the northernmost county of Maine, and it focuses on this really small town of Dalton. And they're coping with a really big tragedy that happened in the first book in 1990. So you check in with all these different characters. I write in multiple perspectives, and you see how everyone's lives intersect and how everyone is coping or not coping with what's happened in the previous book. And it's really just an examination of grief and mourning in a small town and what that looks like for people of different ages and genders and orientations. And it's just kind of a chorus of people living their regular lives.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all three of your answers. Betsy, I'm going to start with you because you kind of ruined my next question.
Good.
All right. So the next place I thought we might go, because Regina, you and Shannon both gave kind of like a little more of a zoomed out answer about your books than Betsy did. It was like a little more zoomed in, which is interesting. And because Betsy, I'd say yours is dealing with like a closer, smaller cast of characters primarily. There are other people in the book, of course. But the next question I was going to ask you all was like, what is the main relationship, or what are some of the most significant relationships in your book that you really wanted to explore? And Betsy, in your answer, you were saying Amy and Olivia, the sisters. I know for a fact, though, there's at least one other significant familial relationship in this book.
There,
The mother.
okay. Okay. I mean, there's a little competition, but yes, I would say that, I mean, we could have called it the Shred family or Lorraine Shred. Yeah, the mother is a big presence. The book really, it was really a toss-up to call it Shred Sisters or the Family Shred, honestly. It's as much about family dynamics, but the two sisters, and I think my own autobiography, come into play, in that I'm one of three sisters. Sibling rivalry and sister intensity has ruled a lot of my life, and it's something I've been obsessed with, and it clearly came out in this book. But as I've been on tour and talking about it, I have found that people really want to talk about the mental illness piece, and how way beyond sibling relationships, how when there's a mentally ill family member, the impact on everyone is profound. So that's been sort of interesting to discover.
Thank you. Regina, was there a particular relationship among the many relationships in this book that really just drew your interest?
Well, if one of the two main characters had not disappeared, there would be no novel. So
Well,
it would have to be Theo and Darla's relationship, but also because it trickles down to the other characters, and then probably Ruby and Katsumi's relationship by extension, because Darla and Ruby have been childhood friends. So her disappearance affects Ruby's life in a number of ways. Yeah.
would you tell our listeners a little bit about where they're coming from, those characters?
Well, the book is set in New York and upstate, primarily, as I said, against the backdrop of the pandemic. And both women have been friends. They attended the same private school in Manhattan since they were little girls. So yes, and
Thank
one's
you.
African and one's blue blood. Yes, from one of the oldest families in New York. Yes. Mhm.
Shannon, were there certain relationships within this town? This is book 2 in a series that kind of drew to the fore in this one.
Yeah, I would say we get a really good look at Beverly Lewis or Beverly Thoreau and her best friend Trudy, but they're more than best friends. And we get a really good glimpse into how their relationships have evolved, or how their relationship and friendship has evolved. But they're both married to men. And so on one hand, you kind of have this illicit affair, but really you see that Bev and Trudy are absolutely soulmates. And they surprised me with their relationship in the first book, but in the second book, it really felt like that was the kind of the heart of it. And throughout the book, Trudy is dealing with her husband has had a heart attack. And she's, how does that affect her relationship with Bev? And we also have not a romantic relationship, but Another one that Trudy is kind of mired in with is Greg Fortin, who's a 19-year-old, and Trudy is in her 40s, but they have this really great friendship because they both are caring. Greg is bisexual and Trudy is a closeted lesbian. And so they have this kind of kinship between them. And they connect through gardening and sass. And Trudy just kind of doles out her loving yet critical advice on life. And that was a really nice, different relationship to sort of explore in this second book. There's a lot of them, but those are the ones that I think about a lot. There's a lot of people in this book.
Yeah. Quick question for everybody. I'm expecting varied responses. When it comes to secondary and tertiary and glancing and community relationships, do you see yourself as taking a more is more approach in this novel or a less is more approach in this particular story? Betsy?
I'm sorry, you froze out just a little in the
Oh.
middle of that.
Did you really want to home in on your major relationships, or did you see it as a more is more approach to people in your world?
Oh, great question. I am obsessed with backstory. And so all of my secondary characters had at least 4 or 5 pages of backstory, all of which my editor cut. So, and I think it was the right thing to do because I think the story just moves that much more. It's a more propulsive read. But I also think that as a result of all that backstory that I wrote, I sort of knew the contours of my characters better without saying so much about them. At least I hope that came through. But so yeah, less is more in this case, but I have more.
Thank you. Shannon, how about you?
I think more is more in my case, because even though I'm focusing on 7 or 8 central characters, really the town of Dalton itself is the character. And that Dalton impacts every decision and every action that all of my other characters make. It's a very insular, isolated small town. And so I don't feel like these people would be who they are without this particular town. And because it's told in multiple perspectives, it kind of reflects that thing that happens when you live in a small town where your story doesn't just end with you. It affects the lady at the post office and the person at the corner store. And I really just liked examining how I could take one big community, well, not a big community, one small community, and just kind of hone in on a few characters who are really entrenched, for better or worse, in that community.
Regina.
I often think about the placement of what we know about characters, just like in real life. Sometimes we learn more about one another from second sources. So secondary characters for me are often a way to reveal new information and new insights about primary characters. It's kind of like the overlap in our lives. And explorations of class through relationships. So that's kind of how I approach it. Less can be more for me, but that less depends on where it's situated, and then more sometimes comes later with a new insight about a character we might have originally hated, but then maybe we have more empathy for. Yeah.
I love hearing that. I've never heard anyone quite put it that way about their secondary characters revealing things about their primary. That's really well said.
Yeah, it is really well said.
When it comes to dialogue, how do you tune your ear? What are you listening to? And does music play any particular role in the cadence of speech in these books? Shannon? I see you nodding. There's a lot of songs in this book, Shannon.
Yes,
a lot
there
of
is.
songs on the radio.
There are, and it's funny because I wouldn't necessarily tie your 2 questions into kind of like the same thought process, because as I'm writing, I'm listening to the songs my character is listening to. So in the first chapter, I have Greg coming home from college. He's listening to the Cranberries and Linda Perry. So that's what I listen to over and over. And I feel like the mood of that, or I hope that the mood of that gets into the text. And when it comes to dialogue, but dialogue is one of my very favorite things to write. I like, it might not surprise a lot of people that as a writer, I feel more comfortable listening to conversations than participating in it. So a lot of what I've never taken like an actual conversation that I've heard and put it in these books, but I definitely pick up on cadences, and there's a lot of regional dialect in my book because it's Northern Maine, and that's I didn't want to go into the tropey things that you see that Mainers say. Like, I don't have any instance of a yacht, and I will never write that. But there is very specific language that exists in this community that I'm writing about. There's a lot of Franco-Americans. There's just this rich culture of woods life and farming life. And so I just tried to take the dialogue that I'd grown up hearing, because my hometown is very much like Dalton. And I just kind of try to infuse it in how my characters speak. And it was really important to me that they sound like real people. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
It
but
absolutely
yeah.
does. And it's kind of like, you're right to point out it's kind of a weird, like Optimus Prime of a yanked together question, but that's just how my mind works. And I
I get
appreciate
it.
your boldness and just going with the flow. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Regina, would you like to take a chance at it?
With music, speaking of music, there's construction in the background. It's driving me a little crazy. I just started. I think I'm going to dip up and close this door in a minute. But music definitely plays a role in dialogue for me. I think I hear the world sort of musically, and I tell students sometimes songs have a beginning, middle, and an end, just like stories. So oftentimes I will listen to music. For example, Prince is referenced a great deal in The Rich People Have Gone Away. And I sometimes write according to music. I might stop and think, oh, this is where I stop because this feels like the right beat or moment to stop. So yes, I hope that answers your question, but definitely. Also, it helps me to understand characters too, because in songs, sometimes we're not afraid to be songwriters aren't afraid to be overly dramatic or even melodramatic. And so listening to a really emotional song can help me gauge how much I want to push something or pull back, and give me permission at times to incorporate more feelings in the writing. Yeah.
Thank you for the gift too of listening to the Ballad of Dorothy Parker for the first time.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a great song.
It was a great song, but of course, silly me, I'm thinking like Dorothy Parker Algonquin Round Table. It's not. It's a great song though.
I'm going to close the door. I'll be right back, okay?
We'll be here. Betsy, I know you're a music fan from before we started recording, so.
Yes, well, I had a playlist going while I wrote the book for sure. It mostly takes place in the 70s and early 80s, so I definitely reprised a lot of my favorite songs. I also am a dialogue junkie. I got kicked out of NYU Film School in 1978, and I've always wanted, and I've written a bunch of screenplays, but what I learned is that screenplays aren't, everyone thinks they're about dialogue, but they're also very much about plot and story and learning how to move them along. And the dialogue can actually be quite minimal in many ways. And so I think one of the things I've learned over the years in dialogue is that it doesn't sound like the way we talk necessarily. And there also, I think less is more, but I also really enjoy writing it. And yeah, as Shannon said, I would rather listen in on the conversation at the table in the restaurant, next to me than the one I'm even in. And often whoever I'm dining with sort of has to say, come back, come back, because I just lock right into any overheard conversations.
That's how you know you're dining with your very best friend, when they can just keep up the farce of the conversation so you can finish the story over here at table 12. Regina, I know you're a playwright too. Am I remembering correctly? Have you also written for screen?
I've written for television, yes, and I write for screen, yeah.
Yeah, did that resonate, what Betsy was saying, dialogue wise?
For me, I love to, since dialogue works differently in film, at the end of the week, if I get enough writing done, I will reward myself by going and watching films. And I think it actually helps me with dialogue, because oftentimes there's a leanness to the dialogue, but it's
Mhm.
also great for me from, I'm not consciously thinking about it. I find I can enjoy it, but I think it does help with rhythm and everything and how people speak. Yeah. Yeah.
The alarms are going off in my town today. That's why I keep muting out. The next question I'd love to address to all three of you, what's it been like to connect with readers of your novel? As I mentioned, all of your publication dates were last year. Shannon, if you would lead us off, what's it been like to connect with readers?
It's been so lovely. So I have the added bonus of being a cataloger at my local library. So I have a lot of connections to this world. And it's been really great I've been working like cataloging new books that are coming in, and someone appears at the office and asks me to sign the copy of their copy of my book, which is really exciting. But what's beyond my own community, what's been really gratifying to see is that people who grew up in small towns or who live in small towns anywhere, whether it's Maine or Florida or Montana or anywhere, there's kind of this universality to Dalton. So even though Dalton is really specific in what's going on there and the people who live there, it lends itself to anyone who's been in that environment can kind of relate to it. And so I've had people get in touch with me from all over who have said, I know a Trudy, I know a Bev. And that's really nice that I can kind of feel connected to people I've never met before, just because we share this understanding of what it is to be in a small community.
Betsy, how about you?
Yeah, as I said before, the mental illness piece has been amazing and harrowing. At every event, there are people who either speak publicly or chase me down later to tell me about their adult child who's been out of their life for years, or who remains unmedicated, or has even taken their own life. There are just so many Olivias out there. And then equally as many people come up to me and say, I'm an Amy. I was the dutiful daughter. I'm the one that couldn't get anybody's attention because my mentally ill sibling, took all the air out of the room and had everybody's on constant worry and high alert and living in that shadow. So it's been extraordinary. And I also, I was diagnosed with bipolar illness when I was 15, and very much like Olivia, I did not go on medication for 15 years. And I really understand this experience from the inside out. And I was also raised, as is in the book, in an era of tremendous shame and stigmatization about mental illness. And my parents were very ashamed. The parents in the book are very ashamed and don't know how to deal with her. And I just want to get that message out, that just to try to reduce the shame and stigma. I think it's much better now, but still very prevalent. And I can tell by so many people just coming up to me and needing to share their experience that they almost whisper it to me. It's like they need to unburden themselves because it is so painful. And at the same time, so deeply gratifying to connect and to feel, that people are getting some solace from this story, or are feeling some, connection to living in this sort of really difficult situation that has no happy endings, no endings. It's really rough. So I've been very grateful to have that opportunity through the novel.
Thank you.
One of the questions one of the statements I get a lot is regarding the lead character, Theo Harper. People will say, I've never been so conflicted about a character in my life. Or very recently, last week, someone said, is he the asshole in all of us? I kind of think he's the asshole in all of us, right? You're making a comment right now, a commentary on the asshole that we all carry around with us. And so that's been gratifying in a way because it was really difficult to write this character and to tap into the humanity, which I think is there. And for me, it's been one of the responses is people have their characters. Like I've had people say, well, I love Nadine and I hope you revisit her, or I like Ruby or this friendship. So everyone has like a character, or is the I love the way the teenager in the Cardi B t-shirt moves throughout the world and what he says about young people against the backdrop of COVID and education during COVID for teenagers. Do you know? So that's been very, very gratifying hearing folks come up and sort of rally for or against characters. Yeah.
So, very brief follow-up. Would you ever consider writing another book featuring some of these characters?
Possibly not straight away, but I do wonder, what would some of them be like 5 years from now? Do you know? Yes.
Yeah, I do. I
Older
wonder.
answer. Yeah. Yeah.
Betsy, what about you? Would you revisit?
You know, the last line of my book is that Amy keeps the door open. And a lot of people have asked me, am I giving myself a sequel right there? I don't think so. I want to move on and I want to challenge myself and not write as quite as autobiographically either. It's very much a coming of age novel that most people would have written in their 20s, but it took me 40 years. So, but it's very much that first coming of age novel. And I think we're good.
Shannon, I know that the third book is written. It will be
Yes.
published this year. When? What's the title? And can you give us a little taste?
Yes. Oh, this is Rosie, by the way. Sorry
Hello,
about that. So the third novel, the conclusion to this trilogy, is called In a Distant Valley, coming out from Europa again, who have been absolutely incredible to work with. October 7th, 2025. It's very exciting. And just today, we did the official cover reveal, and it's gorgeous. I have loved all the covers that they have made at Europa, but this third one is just perfection in my mind. So it's available for pre-order. I encourage people to go check it out. And a question I've been getting a lot is, are you going to keep writing about these characters even though that trilogy is done? And I'm keeping the door open, but like Betsy, for now, I'm moving on.
I love the doors. We're bringing it all the way back, Regina, for
They're
me
like a
and
jar,
reader to
a
your
jar,
book.
yeah.
That's a whole other webinar, though. I see that we are just at time. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Regina Porter, Betsy Lerner, Shannon Bowring. Thank you so much for joining me in conversation today for this webinar. It was a pleasure to read all of your books and to have this time to speak with you. Thank you for your generosity.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been
Thank you.
wonderful.
All right, everybody. So thank you to everybody in the audience who attended today. For completing this webinar, you can download a certificate of completion by scanning the QR code that is currently on screen. There it is. Or by clicking the link to download in the post-attendee email tomorrow. You'll be prompted to enter a password, which is all caps RAW, R-A-W. That'll start the download. We've got more wonderful webinars for you on the way. Scan the code on screen now to register for our next Cut the Line Readers Advisory webinar. It's on May 8th, 2025 at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. We will be discussing romance read-alikes for Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. Till then, take good care. Thanks again for joining us.